Why Iran is the most dangerous game of 2026. Full geopolitical analysis. Right now, somewhere in the Persian Gulf, a decision is being made that could change the price of everything you buy, the country you live in, and the future of global power. It's not happening in Washington. It's not happening in Moscow. It's happening in Tehran. Iran in 2026 is not just a Middle East problem. It is the single most dangerous geopolitical flashpoint on the planet right now, and most people have absolutely no idea how close we are to the edge. In the next 22 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why Iran matters more than any other story in the world today. We'll look at Russia's hidden alliance, China's quiet move, the Hormuz Trap that could crash the global economy, and the three scenarios that will define what happens next. Stay until the end, because scenario 3 is the one nobody is talking about, and it's the most likely one. Let's get into it. To understand why Iran is the most dangerous game of 2026, you need to understand one thing first. Iran has been cornered. For over 2 decades, the United States has applied wave after wave of economic sanctions, military pressure, and diplomatic isolation on Tehran. The goal was simple: force Iran to give up its nuclear ambitions and fall in line with Western interests in the Middle East. It didn't work. Instead, something unexpected happened. Iran adapted. Iran survived. And in surviving, Iran became something far more dangerous than it was before. A country with nothing left to lose. Here are the facts as of today. Iran's nuclear program is more advanced than at any point in its history. According to international monitors, Iran now has enough enriched uranium that, if it chose to, it could produce multiple nuclear devices within weeks. Not years, weeks. At the same time, Iran's economy is under enormous pressure. Inflation is running at dangerous levels. The Iranian rial has lost catastrophic value. Ordinary Iranians are suffering, and yet, the regime in Tehran has not collapsed. It has not negotiated. It has doubled down. Why? Because Iran's leadership has studied history very carefully, and history taught them one lesson above all others. Muammar Gaddafi of Libya gave up his weapons program in 2003. He cooperated with the West. He dismantled his nuclear ambitions in exchange for promises of security and legitimacy. 8 years later, NATO bombed Libya. Gaddafi was captured and killed in the street. Iran watched that. Iran remembered that. And Iran decided surrender means death. This is the foundation of everything happening in 2026. Iran is not acting irrationally. Iran is acting like a country that believes its survival depends on never backing down. And that makes the situation extraordinarily dangerous. Because the United States, under the current administration, has issued what it calls a final deadline for Iran to reach a nuclear agreement. That deadline has already been moved twice. Each time it moves, Iran reads it as weakness. Each time it moves, Iran's negotiating position gets stronger. We are now at a point where neither side feels it can afford to blink. That is how wars start. Now here's where it gets complicated. Iran is not alone. While the world's attention has been focused on Ukraine, on trade wars, on domestic politics, Russia has been quietly building one of the most consequential alliances in modern geopolitical history: Russia and Iran. On the surface, this might seem like an alliance of convenience, 2 sanctioned countries helping each other survive Western pressure, but it goes much deeper than that. Russia has been actively involved in Iran's nuclear infrastructure for years, officially as a civilian energy partner. Russia built Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant. Russian technicians have worked inside Iranian nuclear facilities. But in recent months, intelligence reports and satellite analysis have suggested something more significant. Russia has been supplying Iran with materials, technology, and crucially, diplomatic cover at the United Nations Security Council. Every time the United States tries to push new sanctions through the United Nations, Russia vetoes it. Every time there is an international push to inspect Iranian facilities, Russia blocks it. Russia is not doing this out of friendship. Russia is doing this out of strategy. Think about it from Moscow's perspective. Every day that Iran keeps the United States consumed in Middle East tensions is a day the United States is not focused on Ukraine. Every oil dollar Iran earns through back channels, many of them routed through Russian financial networks, is money that keeps a United States adversary viable. Iran is Russia's pressure valve on American attention and resources. But there's another dimension that almost nobody is discussing: weapons. Iran has been supplying Russia with drones, specifically the Shahed series of attack drones, which Russia has used extensively in Ukraine. In return, Russia has been providing Iran with advanced air defense systems and electronic warfare technology. This is a full military-industrial exchange between two sanctioned states, happening in plain sight, largely unchallenged. What does this mean for 2026? It means that any military action against Iran does not happen in isolation. An attack on Iran risks a Russian response, not necessarily a direct military response, but an escalation of support, intelligence sharing, and proxy action that makes any conflict dramatically more complex. The United States knows this, Israel knows this, and Iran knows that they know. This is part of why the deadlines keep getting moved. If Russia is Iran's shield, China is Iran's economic lifeline. And this is perhaps the most underreported story of 2026. China and Iran signed a 25-year cooperation agreement, a deal worth hundreds of billions of dollars covering oil, infrastructure, military cooperation, and technology transfer. While Western media largely ignored this story, analysts in Beijing and Tehran understood exactly what it meant. Iran had found a buyer that sanctions couldn't touch. Here's how it works in practice. Iran produces oil. Under United States sanctions, Iran is legally prohibited from selling that oil on international markets. But China, which has made clear it does not recognize the legitimacy of unilateral United States sanctions, continues to purchase Iranian oil at discounted prices. Iranian oil flows to China. Chinese money flows to Iran. The sanctions leak. But it goes beyond oil. China has been investing in Iranian ports, railways, and industrial infrastructure. The strategic logic is clear. Iran sits at the crossroads of the Middle East, Central Asia, and the Persian Gulf. Control Iranian infrastructure, and you control a critical node in China's Belt and Road Initiative, its grand plan to build a China-centered global trade network. For China, a surviving Iran is a strategic asset worth protecting. And here's the part that should concern Washington most. China is not just buying Iranian oil. China is integrating Iran into an alternative economic architecture, one that operates outside the United States dollar system, outside SWIFT, outside the financial infrastructure that gives American sanctions their power. If that alternative system reaches critical mass, and it is getting closer every year, American sanctions lose their teeth, not just against Iran, against everyone. This is why the Iran crisis of 2026 is not really about nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are the visible part of the story. The invisible part of the story is a fundamental restructuring of global economic power, with Iran as a key piece on the board. China does not want a war in the Persian Gulf. A war would disrupt the oil flows China depends on and create chaos that benefits nobody. But China also does not want Iran to collapse or surrender. China wants exactly what is happening right now, a prolonged standoff that exhausts American attention, resources, and credibility. Let's talk about the most dangerous 33 kilometers of water on Earth, the Strait of Hormuz. Every single day, approximately 20% of the world's entire oil supply passes through this narrow waterway between Iran and Oman. That is roughly 20 million barrels of oil per day, feeding energy markets in Asia, Europe, and beyond. Iran sits on the northern shore of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's military, specifically the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, patrols these waters. Iran has, on multiple occasions, seized foreign vessels, harassed commercial shipping, and conducted military exercises designed to demonstrate one thing: we can close this strait whenever we choose. This is Iran's ultimate leverage, the Hormuz card. If Iran chose to mine the strait, block it with naval assets, or simply create enough uncertainty that commercial shipping companies rerouted away from the Gulf, the impact on global energy markets would be immediate and catastrophic. Oil prices would spike. Fuel costs would rise everywhere. Supply chains that depend on Gulf energy would fracture. Asian economies that depend on Gulf oil, including China's, would feel the impact within weeks. Here is the brutal paradox of the Hormuz Trap. Iran cannot use this card without hurting itself and its allies, particularly China. Chinese oil imports run through Hormuz. Russian influence in the region depends on stable energy markets. But Iran doesn't need to actually close Hormuz to benefit from the threat of closing it. The mere possibility, the credible threat, is enough to keep insurance costs high, keep shipping companies nervous, and keep Western policymakers awake at night. Iran has turned geographic reality into strategic leverage, and the United States, for all its military power, faces a genuinely difficult problem. Keeping the Strait of Hormuz open requires a constant, expensive naval presence in the Gulf. It requires managing relationships with Gulf Arab states who have their own complicated relationships with Iran, and it requires doing all of this while managing simultaneous pressures in Europe, Asia, and the South China Sea. America is being stretched, Iran knows it, and the Hormuz Trap is one of the key mechanisms through which that stretching happens. So where does this all lead? There are three realistic scenarios for Iran in 2026. I will give you all three, and then tell you which one I think is most likely. The first scenario is the deal. The United States and Iran reach a negotiated agreement on the nuclear program. Iran agrees to cap its enrichment levels and allow enhanced inspections. In return, sanctions are partially lifted, and Iran gets access to frozen assets. This is the best-case scenario. Both sides step back from the edge. The world exhales. The probability? Low. Not impossible, but low. The domestic political constraints on both sides make a genuine deal extremely difficult. Any Iranian leader who appears to surrender to American pressure risks their position. Any American administration that gives Iran sanctions relief risks being accused of weakness. Deals happen when both sides are more afraid of war than of compromise. We are not there yet. The second scenario is a military strike. Israel, with or without explicit American approval, conducts airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. Iran retaliates through proxies across the region, Hezbollah in Lebanon, militias in Iraq, Houthi forces in Yemen. The region enters a period of sustained low-intensity conflict that stops short of all-out war. This scenario is more likely than a deal. Israel has consistently signaled it will not allow Iran to become a nuclear power, and Israel's calculus is different from America's. For Israel, a nuclear Iran is an existential threat, not just a strategic problem. The wild card is Iranian retaliation. If Iran strikes Israeli territory directly, as it did in April 2024, the escalation dynamics become very hard to control. The third scenario is controlled chaos. This is the scenario nobody talks about, and I believe it is the most likely outcome of 2026. Neither a deal nor a major military strike happens. Instead, the situation continues exactly as it is. Deadlines moved, negotiations stalled, proxy conflicts grinding on, sanctions slowly leaking, Iran's nuclear program slowly advancing. Controlled chaos benefits multiple parties. Iran buys time for its nuclear program. Russia keeps American attention divided. China keeps buying discounted oil. And Western governments avoid the domestic political cost of either a failed deal or a bloody war. The world stumbles forward, not to resolution, but to a new normal where Iran is a threshold nuclear state that nobody officially acknowledges and nobody officially stops. This is not a comfortable scenario, a threshold nuclear state in one of the world's most volatile regions, backed by Russia, economically integrated with China, controlling a choke point for global energy, is a permanently destabilizing force. But it may be the scenario that nobody has the will to prevent. Here is what I want you to take away from this analysis. The Iran crisis of 2026 is not a regional story. It is a story about the limits of American power, the rise of alternative global alliances, and the fragility of the economic system that the modern world is built on. The decisions made in the next 12 months, in Washington, in Tehran, in Moscow, in Beijing, in Tel Aviv, will shape the next decade of global history. And most people are not paying attention. That is why we do this. That is why analysis like this matters. If this video gave you a clearer picture of what is actually happening in the world, share it. The people around you deserve to understand this. Subscribe to UNN, Unfiltered News Network. We will keep bringing you the analysis that cuts through the noise. Stay ahead, stay informed, stay unstoppable.